Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Book Blab. I'm Amy, and I'm here with Suzanne, and we are hosting another episode about a bookish topic, and we're glad to have some people joining us today. So, Suzanne, let's talk about school. And so, your oldest, Josh, you guys are you doing like a Joy School with him?
Yep. So he'll start kindergarten next year. So this year is sort of our 1 year of nobody being in official formal schooling since I graduated in May. But we are doing Joy School with him and a few other organized activities. But yeah. What about you guys? Back to school at your house?
Yep. And this is actually so Bradley, my third, he's in the same school year as Josh, so he also didn't start kindergarten this year. But this is actually our first year paying for preschool, which is kind of a new experience for me because I've always done like a preschool co-op or Joy School or something like that and loved it. But this year I just wasn't feeling it, and I have to say I've been really happy to
Good.
and just send him, and he has been so happy. Feels more like real school to him, I think, because it's the same place every day, and so he's liking it and I'm liking it, and we're all good. But I brought up school because we thought it would be fun this month to talk about reading for educational purposes. So there are so many reasons to read, but I'm sure many readers, one of their main reasons is so that they can learn something new. And I know that you do that, Suzanne. So do you want to start off by talking a little bit about what you read and why you read for educational reasons?
Yeah, well, so I will say that first and foremost, my number one reading motivation is for pleasure. Like it is. I love, love, love pleasure reading, and I always try to protect my pleasure reading time. But when I was in undergrad, I was an English teaching major, and in our reading courses, one of the things that my professors stressed was that the vast majority of adults don't read for pleasure, they read for information.
I find that so interesting, actually.
It is interesting. I mean, people still read for pleasure. Adults still read for pleasure more than reading for information, but it's a high segment of the population that only reads for informational purposes.
And that probably is true. Sorry to jump in, but I think
go ahead.
So it's interesting because when I'm talking to my friends, I actually find that the majority of them either fall into only reading for pleasure because they don't want their reading to be touched at all by anything that even looks like learning. They want to just immerse themselves in a
escapism.
Yes, escape. And then the other, they don't even want to touch the fiction because for them that feels like a waste of time. And so I think I see those two categories a lot. And then of course there's the third category, which we're both in, which is we read for all reasons. Yeah.
Yes. So primarily for pleasure, but yeah, all the time. I read all the time for informational reasons. And I was actually looking at a survey. The Pew Center did a survey a few years ago about reasons people read. And I thought one of their funny statistics was that the parents of small children tend to do the most informational reading. And I was like, oh, yes.
I'm sure that's true. Me.
Reading, because, all the time, parenting books or food books or health books or like baby sleep books, pregnancy books. So that's what I'm in right now, gearing up to reread all of my pregnancy books. Because there's so much I don't know about parenting still. And then I'm trying to figure out. So yeah, there's
always a new phase with parenting, always something. Or your kids all of a sudden start doing something you've never seen before. You have to that you have to run out and grab a book for. That happened with my 6-year-old. All of a sudden I was just like, who is this kid? Like he's just showing all of these like very strong-willed tendencies that I think were always there, but I hadn't noticed it. So the next day I was at the library checking out books on strong-willed children. I was like, how do I deal with this?
Yes, parenting is a huge motivation for informational reading for me. And plus just I mean, other areas too. Nutrition is one that I read a lot about. That's just a topic that's interesting to me. So I read for information on that. Yeah, I find a lot of reasons, a lot of things I'm curious about that I will read nonfiction informational books about just to learn more about the topics. So, Amy, how about you? What are some of your parenting, obviously?
Yes, parenting for sure. And I do find, so for me, sometimes informational reading can be a little bit dry, and I have to have a really strong motivator to make me read it. But then other times it can be almost as interesting, if not more so, than the fiction reading. You know, sometimes nonfiction is just, you can't get through it fast enough because it's just fascinating to learn about something. So
absolutely.
And if it's written really well. But I do find for myself that when I'm reading to specifically learn something, that it's motivated by something. You know, it's not just a book that I pick up randomly at the library. It's because I went out in search of a specific kind of book. So as I was preparing for this, I was thinking of some examples. And I remember when my second son, Max, when I was pregnant with him, his name is Maxwell, and we were naming him after one of our church leaders, Neil A. Maxwell. And so I just felt compelled to learn more about the person that we were naming Max after. And so I read his big biography to kind of gear up, and I was like, wow, our Max has really big shoes to fill after I read that. And then another time I remember, so I was a music major in college, and sometimes I just feel a little bit sad that I've kind of let some of that go a little bit, and I'm not as invested in the music world as I used to be. And so another time I read this huge 500-page biography on Beethoven just because I was like, I just need to do some hardcore music learning right now. So,
well, and
then, oh yeah.
These were both biographies, which is a sort of a specific type of informational reading that's like really fascinating. It's a person's life story, it's historical, and
it is fascinating. At the same time, I do feel like biographies tend to be a little bit drier than some other nonfiction reading, at least for me. Like,
depending on the author.
Yeah, it depends a lot on the author. Memoirs, for sure, which are also about a person's life but written by themselves, tend to be more fast-paced and I think just emotional than a biography. And so you're still kind of learning about someone's life, but it doesn't feel as technical as if you're reading a biography written by kind of a third-party observer, someone who's just been acquiring facts. But yeah. And then, yeah, I do a lot of reading, parenting reading like we talked about. I remember with my third son, I was frustrated with the way we'd introduced food to him or to our previous children. It was just always this source of anxiety for me, and I felt like they weren't turning into good eaters. So I read this book called Baby-Led Weaning. Have you read that one?
Oh, I haven't read a specific book, but I've done online research about it for sure.
So I read the book because I was just interested in learning more about it. And we used it with our third and our fourth, and it was so much better. So yeah. And then certainly just like improving my own habits. So like I read Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. I just felt like anytime I feel like I'm kind of getting into a slump myself, I find it really just kind of empowering to read a self-help type book that can kind of help me refocus.
I love those self-help. They get a bad rap in society, self-help books. But like some self-help books are just like really inspirational, motivational, inspiring, like, and actually really helpful as far as like, I have changed my life for the better because of reading this book. Yeah.
I agree. And actually, as I was thinking about all these different subgenres within the nonfiction category, I was like, we could really do an episode on any one of these topics like explore it further, because there's just so much to talk about with,
and we probably will.
Yes. Probably. So yeah. Okay. So we've talked so far just about nonfiction, but we can also learn a lot from fiction. Fictional reading, even though, like we said, lots of times it's for pleasure, it can also be a great avenue to learning new things and really just expanding ourselves and thinking about things in a new way. So, Suzanne, how do you use fictional reading to kind of broaden your perspective and ideas?
Yeah, so I actually feel pretty strongly about this. I mean, like, I am an English major, and it's kind of my thing. And like, we read fiction, literature, and I feel, very strongly that it is educational as well, and that it's, I mean, anyone who reads literary fiction, a lot of that's not for pleasure. Not for
right. Doesn't end happy.
It can be just as much of a slog. But there's still a lot of benefit to reading fiction and to reading certain types of literature that's nonfiction that can really push and help you expand. And I'll just, going back to just getting information, like historical information. So classic novels or historical fiction novels are actually a great way to learn about history. And just
for sure.
Like one example, I think I read, it was A Tale of Two Cities in 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time that I'd kind of really learned anything about the French Revolution, because I guess I hadn't studied world history yet by 8th grade. I don't know. Right. And I was fascinated. I was fascinated by the French Revolution, and then after reading that, I was like, I need to find out what happens next after the French Revolution. So that inspired me to go on and read War and Peace, which
wow, I don't think
is not like a lot. It's not a lot
to read War and Peace after reading A Tale of Two Cities.
Well, but like I knew that Napoleon followed the French Revolution. And so like the two aren't necessarily connected at all, but like historically one followed the other. And it was just a fascinating period of French history for me to learn about, but through fictional books. Yes. And it was, I loved it.
And here we have a perfect example of why you are a perfect English major. That in 8th grade, you read A Tale of Two Cities and then read War and Peace. I love it.
I was a pretentious reader in middle school for sure. But it really was a great way to learn about history for me. Mm-hmm. And then I was interested in learning about history because of the literature that I was reading and because I wanted to know more about the events going on. But there's so many other ways to use literature as a way to grow and to learn and to expand. And I think one of the big reasons I started my book blog was to have a place to write and think on a deeper level about what I was reading and engage with it on a deeper level and draw connections between books and to think about things in a focused and disciplined way, which is, if you're in school and you're in an English class or a literature class or anything like that, you have a professor who's assigning you reading and who's helping you make connections and think deeper about the stuff that you're reading. But in real life, in my non-school adult life, I don't have that, but it's one of the ways that I learn. It's like one of my favorite things ways to work my brain, right? Is to think critically about what I'm reading. And so I love book clubs for that reason, and the book blog and the book blogging community. You obviously, people that I can talk to about books and engage with them in a deeper way, because that's totally working your brain.
Yep.
And reading for learning.
I agree.
So what about you? Yeah.
Well, you've already mentioned two of the ways, and I did want to say. Well, I want to say a couple of things about both of those first. First, the historical fiction. I can remember being probably, 11 or 12, and reading two historical fiction books that kind of changed my perspective on things. So the first was Johnny Tremain, which takes place during the Revolutionary War. And then the second was Rifles for Wadey, which takes place during the Civil War. And I think that was really my first experience where those wars became real to me. Mm-hmm. Even though the characters in them were fictional, but they were interacting with real characters and taking part in real events. And I think that really just changed my opinion about history, that history was a fascinating subject. So I definitely think that historical fiction for me is a great way to actually retain the information, because then I can
Absolutely.
with a story and with characters. Whereas when I'm reading, I mean,
learning through a story. It's learning through a story. Our brain
Exactly.
loves stories and processes stories, and yeah, it's a great way to learn.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm thinking back to some like histories. Like I've read some David McCullough, and I like him a lot, but I find that I don't retain that information as well, because I mean, he tells stories in there, true stories, and they are interesting, but sometimes just having that narrative flow just really
helpful.
Yeah. And then I wanted to say the same thing that you were saying about a book blog, because that's exactly why I started mine also, because I just felt like I needed a place to actually process the things that I was learning, or not even learning, but just thinking and feeling. And it just felt, I don't know, I think I was missing school a little bit. And just to compose a blog post or a book review and really get my thoughts out there made me feel almost like I was handing in an assignment again or something like that. You know, it just felt so good to hit publish and think, oh, I got all of that information out of my head and down on paper, and it feels so good. So,
and
definitely that.
And my experience with that too is, you know, so I do consider most of it pleasure reading, for sure. But even when it's like the cotton candiest, fluffiest book of all time, that's like, you know, like totally turn off your brain entertainment, when I sit down to write about it, you know, like I still find myself like, so what was it that I didn't like, or what was it that made this better or worse than something else, or you know, like
thinking about it in a critical way. Even just instead of just saying, oh, that was the worst novel ever, like you can really process it and think about what made it so that it didn't work. Was it the writing, or was it the characters, or was it just that the plot was so weak and had no place to go? And
or even just thinking about like, you know, like this is such a cotton candy book, why do I like it so much? You know, and it's because of this or this reason or this reason. And it's okay. It's okay that I'm getting pleasure out of this, because it's all right. It's all right. You know, like, I'm embarrassed to tell anyone I've read this book, but
I
still enjoy it.
Know exactly what you mean.
But just stopping to think about it is, you know, it's an intellectual experience, and it's learning in a way. Yeah.
Yep. The one other thing I wanted to mention with fiction is just that sometimes fiction can be such a great way to think about a particular subject, like parenting or like marriage.
Absolutely.
So that's why I like it, that you can learn so much through fiction. So I remember last year I read two books. One was Little Men by Louisa May Alcott. Yeah. That was kind of like my parenting novel of 2015, and it was totally fiction, but I was just so inspired by Jo March and the way she parented. And then the other was Middlemarch by George Eliot, and that was just this profound treatise on marriage that I was not expecting. It was just, you know, fiction again, but so many different ways to look at marriages, and good marriages and marriages that aren't working so well. And so,
absolutely. And I see that as a strong motivation for reading fiction that I don't necessarily always find pleasurable, right? Like, certain types of literary fiction or whatnot, because you're often exposed to viewpoints or ideas or thoughts that are totally outside your like realm of experience, and it can be good for me to like spend some time in a news and thinking and feeling that way and living through experiences that you've never had before. And and it's like emotional growth too. It's not just intellectual growth, but like emotional growth and learning how to empathize with other people. I mean, it's a great part of fiction.
People, learning to empathize with people who don't think the same as you. Like if you can engage with a character that is not anywhere similar to you at all, but still find a way to empathize with them and relate to them, I mean, that's amazing. So, for sure. And I also wanted to say, I feel like when I come up with my reading goals for the new year, lots of times the goals that I choose have to do with some form of education. and I think that's why I'm making the goals, because I want to stretch myself in some way, whether it's reading something like a classic or literary fiction that seems hard or scary to me, or learning about a new topic. And I just know that without the goal, that will just keep getting pushed down the list because it just sounds kind of daunting. So it's really nice for me to have those goals to work towards, so that I actually do that educational reading that I do love, but that sometimes isn't as tantalizing as the fast-paced.
Well, and it's what I love about reading goals in general, and yours specifically, is that it's, I mean, once again, if you were in school, you're getting assigned, you're reading, and you you have your assignment and you're pushed and stretched that way. So in real life, reading goals take the place of those. They're just self-assignments, I guess, is what it is.
Exactly. And the great thing about them is that you can tailor them to what you actually are interested in, instead of just having it be this arbitrary thing that your teacher has decided you should learn, which can be very good and very eye-opening. But sometimes it's just nice to kind of be able to direct it yourself into things that you're actually interested in.
It's a great life skill.
Yes.
learning how to self-direct your own learning and education, and to always be growing and reading. Anyway, yeah, I know.
And we should say, I know that no one is watching this right now, but for those of you who watch after we post it on our blogs, we would love to hear your thoughts about reading for education, and what some of your best books have been and most memorable books have been that have helped you learn new things. So feel free to share in the comments on either of our blogs.
Yes, we'd love to hear.
Okay, so now we get to go to our book recommendation part of our video. And so the most obvious thing to recommend this month was a book that has impacted us, changed us, helped us learn something new. So Suzanne, I'm curious to know what you ended up choosing.
All right, so I've been doing a lot of informational reading recently, actually. So I had a few to pick from, and one that sort of made a big impact on me towards the end of August, I think, was, hey, I'm going to slaughter this author's name. Anyway, it was Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. Is it Atul? Atul?
Oh, I've heard it pronounced, so I think you're...
Okay. All right. Sorry, Dr. Gawande, however you say your name.
That was a good one, and I almost picked that one because you didn't mention that one at first, but I didn't. So that's good. Okay. I'm glad you decided to talk about this one.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Now, it was fascinating. It's a topic that I didn't think I was necessarily interested in, because it's a topic about the medical process of dying in America, which is, I'm not thinking about my own mortality a whole lot right now, thankfully.
Right.
But it was really eye-opening and really fascinating, and I learned so much about just how care facilities work in our country and how aging works. It sounds so depressing. Anyway, and just so many interesting things. It was depressing, but really, really good to think about, in the case of an illness, what do I want to have happen with my own, like medical treatment, or people that I love around me, what kind of conversations to have with them. And yeah, it was very impactful, very good stuff.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that one.
When you talked about it on your blog, and you did mention, it's very depressing. And it's interesting because maybe I'm more morbid than you, but there were some stories and some scenarios where I was like, this is really sad and really hard to read about. But I think overall, I came away feeling more empowered than depressed, if that makes sense. I feel like I was just like
empowered. It may have been close to home because I feel like my grandparents are going through some stuff right. Yeah, and so I was just like, oh, this is so close to home.
That is true, and for sure, some things did hit close to home. But I think it just made me think, I can die. I mean, I won't get to choose the way I die, but there are some choices that I can make that can help me live the life I want to for as long as
and to be intentional about it up until the end, right? And to be in control too, to maintain control. Anyway, it was very, very good, and it was one that I probably need to reread later on too.
Yeah. Well, and did you find with that one, because I think when you tell someone about the topic, like it just sounds horrible.
Oh yeah. Talking to my husband about it, he was just like, why are you reading this?
Yeah. But I felt like I really liked the writing actually, and I found it very engaging. So
definitely, he's definitely a good writer.
On it, I feel like it's not a dry.
No, it's well written. It's interesting, fascinating, and super, super important. Right, like an important book. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Yep.
So I'm curious to know, what's your recommendation?
Okay. Well, I went a completely different route, and I just thought, okay, what have I read and then purchased because I wanted to have it as a reference, like on my, so different than just like, I love that book so much, I want to reread it or whatever, but just one that I was like, if I have a question, what book do I want to be able to like pull off my shelf? So this was one that I read last year. It's called Honey for a Child's Heart by Gladys Hunt.
Yes.
And have you read this one?
I haven't. I bought it as gifts for people.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a great gift.
It's been on my Christmas list, I think, since you mentioned it. So maybe for Christmas this year.
Such a good gift for like a new mom or someone like that. So this is just the first part of the book just talks about why reading is such an important part of a child's growing up, and how, for me, it's always very validating because I'm like, the one thing I love to do with my kids, it's my favorite thing to do with my kids, is actually like one of the best things to do with them. And so it's always, I'm like, yes, I'm doing something right. But then the second half of the book is just list after list after list of book recommendations. And
which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I need this soon.
They're really good. And, she breaks it down into ages from babies, toddlers, preschoolers, up through elementary kids, and even teenagers, although she does have another book that is for teenage reading, specifically young adult reading. And so she gets into it more with that one, which I haven't looked at because we don't have any teenagers yet. But yeah, it's just been good because then, if we're ever in a place, especially with my kids, where they're looking for something to read, and I certainly have a lot of other places where I'm going for book recommendations and a lot of other places I hear books about, but sometimes it just catches you off guard. They're like, what should I read next? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. So we can always go to this and find something that's just right for them. And so it's just a great book to have as a reference, but it was also a great book to read. I have to admit, I read through all the book lists. Like, I did not skim them. I read through them because she gives like little synopsises, and it was just very interesting. And I was just like, this is so overwhelming to hear about so many good books, but it's also so much fun. So yeah, that was a good one.
That is a great one. Yep, I've got to get it. Got to get it too. All right. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us again this month, and especially with our new format that we've kind of got going on here now that Blab is dead and we're working with Google Hangout. A little bit different, but we're making it work. Committed to making this work.
It's true.
We will be back next month with another great show on a fun bookish topic. So we'll see you then.
Okay, bye.
Bye.